I spent 22 years on Ohio's death row for a crime I could not and did not commit. And don't think it can't happen to you. I was the most common Joe that there is, no pun intended since my name is Joe. But I was never in trouble before with the law. I was an honorably discharged war veteran. And they put me on death row because the real murderer pointed his finger at me and said he stood there and watched while I killed this kid. And the sad thing is, that poor boy will never get justice because the police will not go after the real murderers, because by doing so shows they should have never came after me. And that is the saddest part of it all. My life was destroyed over this, but that poor 19-year-old kid is dead, and he'll never get any justice. And the sad thing is, the police and prosecutors are still lying to the boy's father, saying that I did it and got away with it. But I can prove who really did do this, but they don't want to listen to me. The sad thing is, like I said, I was the most common Joe. I went straight from high school into the Army. Did 4 years, got out as a sergeant. As soon as I got out, I needed a job. So I got a quick job doing landscaping. I was hired on September 1st. September 26th, I was sitting in jail. The foreman of the landscaping company pointing his finger at me saying he stood there and watched. The sad thing is, he's the one that butchered this kid. He's the one that cut him up and threw him in a creek. And yet I got accused of it. I have the shortest death penalty trial in the state of Ohio history. 2 3/4 days, from let's start to you die. The thing is, excuse me, I got a cold, sorry. The only thing that is good about that is 10 years after I was arrested and convicted, a Catholic priest came and I convinced him to take my case. But he's not only a Catholic priest, he's also an attorney and a registered nurse. And he has to be all three of those things to do what he did for me and free me. Because this case is so confusing and so ridiculous that if I had to tell you it in its entirety, you'll be like, no. The police don't do that. The prosecutors don't do that. The coroner doesn't get on the stand and lie, but they do. And if they will do it to me, they can do it to you and not even bat an eye. And the sad thing is, 80% of the evidence that was found to free me was in 3 places: the prosecutor's file, the police file, and the coroner's file. And it was there all along. They withheld it from me. Anything that didn't fit their case, they withheld or destroyed, or intimidated witness to say something different than what was initially reported. And like I said, they have no problem doing this. And if it wasn't for that Catholic priest, they would have executed me 10 years ago and not even batted an eye. And the sad thing is, once they execute you, they get to destroy all the evidence. So that 80% of the evidence that we found in their files is what led us to the 20%. So by getting rid of that 80%, I would have been part of this statistic that they do not execute innocent people, because they never could have proved I didn't do this. Even though I said from day one, I had nothing to do with that boy's death. But they don't listen to you. No one listens to the dead man walking. No one listens to the man in the orange jumpsuit. Once they see you on TV or in the courtroom and you got that orange jumpsuit on, well, you must have done something. Why else would the prosecutor have you there and be telling you all these, that he's the butcher of North Royalton and the murderer of Cleveland and all the other stuff that they called me? And it's beyond control, and it's the worst nightmare you can ever think in your life. Because not only was I in prison, I was on death row and had numerous execution dates. I came within 3 days of being executed because my attorney didn't file a motion that was needed for a stay. If it wasn't for me learning the law, because I saw nobody else was going to help me, if it wasn't for me learning the law, they would have executed me. But I had to fight, because no one wants to listen to you. I wrote everybody, every journalism school, every law school, every innocent project. There's no DNA in my case. Most innocent projects back then wouldn't touch your case if you didn't have DNA. I wrote every newspaper, everybody, ABC, NBC, CBS, everybody. No one wants to listen to you. No one listens to the dead man walking. And like I said, the funny thing is, these recommendations of the task force, if they were all in place, I wouldn't have been on death row ever. Because mine was snitch testimony. And that's exactly what that guy was a snitch. Even though he was the one that did it. And probably if they would have recorded when they interrogated him, they probably would have been totally contradicting to what was in his first police report. And then what was in his second police report 2 days later when it totally contradicted the first police report. It just goes on and on and on. And the sad thing is, like I said, it can happen to you or your kids or your grandkids, and they don't care because all they worry about is statistics. I have an 82% conviction rate. I make your streets safe. I'm tough on crime. Re-elect me. Sound familiar? Next time they tell you that, think about how they destroyed my life. They took 80% of my adult life. I went in when I was 26. I got out, I'm now 52. Can't get a job, can't get an apartment, can't get a loan. If it wasn't for the Catholic priest that freed me, I'd have nothing. He gave me a job. Luckily, I had an old friend that I went to school with. I live with him. Can't get a loan. And it's looking like I'll get absolutely no money from the state for violating my constitutional rights and destroying my life. Because prosecutors and police have sovereign immunity. And to beat that, the burden is so high, it's ridiculous. So it looks like I'll have to work until I die. I'll have this hanging over my head for the rest of my life, and no one cares. No one cares. So, since we're not going to abolish the death penalty in Ohio right now, because of our legislators are so set on having it, we have to take these recommendations and push them. And the only way to do that is for you to stand up and be accounted for. Tell your legislators, tell your people that you don't want the death penalty, but if we're going to have it, at least try to make it fair. And the only way to do that is to take these recommendations and enact them, all of them. Not one, not two, all 56 need to be enacted. It won't happen. Prosecutors won't let it. And they are so powerful in this state, it's ridiculous. But if you stand up and make enough noise and get your friends to do it before this happens to one of your relatives or a loved one, and they lose their life. I was lucky. God sent me an angel in the way of a Catholic priest. He answered my prayers. But it could have been so simple as maybe it was God's idea that I die as a martyr. Who knows? But it can happen, and it will happen. I'm only the 6th in Ohio history, really. 6. We have executed 53 men in the state of Ohio. European sent over a camera crew to do some filming, and they had a strange title that they used, 1 for 10. What that stands for is for every 10 men executed, 1 man is released, freed. 1 in 10. What are those odds? It can't happen. and it shouldn't happen. But until we abolish the death penalty, we need to at least try to make it fair and accurate. That's why you have to stand up. Let your voices be heard. Because if you don't, innocent people are going to die.